Magandang gabi mga katipon sa Pilipinas. Ito po ang inyong katipunan. Ito po ang ating katipunan. Muling sumasa inyo mga tagapakinig upang magbigay ng mahalagang impormasyon, magbigay liwanag at higit sa lahat makinig sa inyong mga daing at kuro-kuro hinggil sa mga problemang patuloy na nagpapahirap sa ating kalagayan at kabuhayan. Sa susunod na oras, bali 2 oras, sisikapin po namin ipaliwanag ang iba-ibang bahagi ng ating ekonomiya at ang mga mabibigat pang local and international issues na may malaking epekto sa ating buhay at kinabukasan. Ito po ang inyong katipon na si Butch Valdes, kasama ang iba pa nating katipon dito mula sa Save the Nation, Philippine La Rouge Society, Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino. Walang iba kundi si Carlos Itos Valdes, yung aking pong panganay, who's manning the controls now, no? At kami po dito ay nag-aanyaya sa inyo na makibahagi sa ating talakayan sa pagsusuri ng mga kasalukuyang problema at paghanap ng kaukulang solusyon. Okay, alam niyo po, what have been, ito po, papasok na po tayo dito sa, calibrated, tawag dito, loosening of the ECQ, the expanded quarantine, o EQC, ano ba dito?
ECQ.
ECQ ba?
To GCQ.
GCQ, ECQ to GCQ, okay. Ibig sabihin po nito sa akin pong humble understanding, dahil medyo masalimuot yung mga lumalabas na mga detalye galing sa IATF. Basically, it is to loosen up on certain areas, certain geographical areas, certain cities, certain provinces, at tapos certain businesses that will be allowed to open, and even schools might be allowed to open in again certain areas depending on the IATF evaluation of the situation. No? Ganyan po ang nakikita natin. Now, calibrated po to, hindi po bigla-bigla, no? Hindi po from what we have now all of a sudden bukas lahat, no? At dahan-dahan pong aabot yan hanggang May 14 o May 15, no? Tapos i-evaluate na naman kung ano ba ang sitwasyon, lalong-lalo na dito sa mga maalis sa lockdown, itong mga kabataan. Sabi nila, pag binuksan mo daw yung mga eskwelahan, kaya baka biglang mag-surge sa mga COVID cases sa mga kabataan, no? At pag pinabayan mo naman lahat ng mga senior citizens lumabas, napaka-delikado na nga ng mga senior citizens dahil I think 80% ng mga napipinsala, 80% ng mga namamatay, 80% ng nagkakaroon ng COVID cases are senior citizens po. Yung nalalabig 20%, pinaghahatian na lang between 50 years old and down to 1 years old. Pero makikita niyo po talagang mabigat ang sitwasyon para sa senior citizens. Actually, bago pa po itong COVID issue, itong 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, maybe 5 years even before. Naririnig ko na po, pati ang mga doktor namin. Huwag kayong magtatagal sa hospital o kung pwede, huwag na kayong pumunta sa hospital. Bakit? Madaming doon, virus at baka makakuha kayo ng pneumonia at pag tinamaan kayo ng pneumonia, baka hindi na kayo makaalis ng hospital. This was all the time, the warning. I am sure many of you might, who are listening now, have heard that, no? At meron pa mga iba, nagsasabi sila, kailangan magpabakuna ka, anti-flu, anti-pneumonia, o kung ano-ano pa, no? At meron mga tao talagang nagpapabakuna, sinasabi they will be given 5 years immunity and so on and so forth. We never know whether that really works, di ba? Pero ito po ang nangyayari. Lalong-lalo na kung nandito na yung COVID, padagdag ng padagdag. But that's also another issue. That issue is ganito po. Bakit ba lahat ngayon ang namamatay sa mga ospital, lahat parang COVID cases? At wala na po tayo naririnig na namamatay sa ibang mga karamdaman. Yung mga heart attacks, yung mga pneumonia or coming from flu, walang COVID pero flu, at itong mga cancer, itong mga gastroenteritis, cholera, and so on and so forth, dengue, wala po tayong naririnig na namamatay tungkol dyan. Para bagang lahat na pumasok sa emergency room, COVID agad, COVID, no? Hindi namin po malaman kung bakit hindi lumalabas itong mga statistics hinggil dito. Ngayon, naglalabasan na sa mga ibang bansa sa kanilang lugar. Pero dito po sa atin, hindi pa po lumalabas. Parang minamasahe pa po yata ng Department of Health. Okay? Okay, but that is the situation. Pero baka pagod na tayong pinapag-usapan nito at maraming po nagsasabi at nagtatanong, what next and what will happen? No? What are the things that need to be done and what can be done? Ano ba ang talagang kakayanan ng ating pamahalaan? Nakikita na po natin ngayon ang kakayanan. No? At maski pa paano, they're doing their best. You know, people like Carlito Galvez, I can see that he's doing his best. And pero kung kulang ka sa infrastructure at kulang ka sa mga logistics, no? Talagang mahihirapan ka. At ang only recourse mo is to go into lockdowns and ECQs or EQCs, no? Dito sa quarantine. Kasi wala kang gamot, wala kang mga not enough doctors, not enough nurses, not enough hospitals, and not enough knowledge on the disease that makes nobody seems to be an authority here that can talk about the disease except those that we read in Facebook at kung saan natin nababasa. Pero dito, makikita mo, wala tayong naririnig maski na kay sikat na Duque, no? Wala tayong naririnig, puro kamada, puro PR, puro ganitong nangyayari. Tapos, ang nakikita lang natin, binabara yung mga ibang mga medicines na pwedeng i-testing at hinihintay maglabas ng gamot ang Sanofi o itong mga pharma na kaibigan na konektado si Secretary Duque. This is what's happening. Because of this situation, many people, even before the COVID, have already started to consider na baka kinakailangan medyo overhaul ang situation. Kami po dito sa KDP, bago pa po ito, even before we organized the KDP, nagtutulak na po kami against the privatization of electricity and water. At hindi po kami naglubay dito sa ganitong klaseng movement hanggang ngayon. Dumaan na yung eleksyon hanggang ngayon. Meron po mga iba gusto magkaroon ng tawag dito, federalization. No? Ang sabi nila, kung federalized form of government tayo, mas madali natin ayusin itong mga problema natin tingil sa ekonomiya at iba-iba pa sa politika. Yung mga iba naman ang sinasabi, wala talagang kakayanan sa hindi mo na pwedeng asahan ang ating mga congressmen at senators, puro mga gani dyan at puro bayaran ng mga oligarko. Pati na rin ang judiciary, ang judicial system natin po, alam nyo na, kayo lahat. Kung nakapunta na kayo sa korte, kung nakausap nyo na yung abogado nyo para kausapin itong mga kinakailangan na husgado, alam nyo na lahat na corrupt yung judicial system natin. From the lowest ranking judge all the way up to the highest sa judicial system natin. Corrupt. So, you have a corrupt judicial system, a corrupted legislature, and an incompetent and partially corrupt at this point executive. Let us save the president from corruption, assuming that he is not corrupt, because personally I still believe in his honesty and his integrity and his willingness to do good for the people. But the people around him, I'm almost sure they're all corrupt. The people around him. And they give him the wrong advice in order to sustain themselves in this position and opportunity to gain, to get rich, to get filthy rich in this position. Yan po yung kabinete niya. So dahil dito, itong mga nagsasabing kinakailangan magkaroon ng overhaul, sila sabi nila, kailangan gumalaw na kasi kung hindi gagalaw at magpalitan ng ating gobyerno itong sistema ito, tuluyan na tayong babagsak at tuluyan na tayong makokontrol ng mga oligarko. Kasi ang mga oligarko ngayon ang may control sa judicial system, silang nagbabayad ng mga yan eh. Kaya wala kayong nakikitang na nakakasuhan at nakukulong dahil sa non-payment of taxes, lahat. Tapos sa legislature, yung mga kongresista at senado, sila po ang naglagay dyan dahil sa mga eleksyon. Yung COMELEC, hawak na hawak po ng mga oligarko. Darating ang panahon, pati na po ang presidente dito sa darating na eleksyon, sila na po ang pipili niyan ng mga oligarko. Dahil dito, sabi ng mga iba, kinakailangan gumalaw na. At huwag na natin papabayaan umabot pa dun sa ganyang level na problema na pagpati na yung presidente, hawak na nila, ay saan po pa po tayo pupunta? Dahil ang ating capacity for a revolution is negated. No? Ngayon, paano kung meron pong mga ganyan nag-iisip. This evening, my guest is a good friend of mine. His name is Gil Ramos. No? At madalas namin pinapag-usapan ito via telephone dahil he's from now based in Tallahassee, Florida, US. No? And it's about 7:30 in the morning there. And I'm sure he has accommodated us by waking up early at para pag-usapan itong mga dapat po nating sigurong isipin at planuhin kung man meron tayong mga kakailanganin gawin para sa pagpapaunlad ng ating bayan at magkaroon tayo ng mas magandang kinabukasan para sa mga darating na henerasyon. Nandiyan na ba si Gil?
You want us to call him now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, tatawagin na po natin si Gil Ramos, no? At yan ang ating pag-uusapan ngayon. Gil is an economist, no? And he's also a political analyst, and he's many other things. He's familiar with governance, he's familiar with finance, and many other areas. So Gil, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear. I was just giving a brief background there for you and how we have been discussing many things. including the possibility, if ever there is need for it, no, of changes in government structure, government amendments to the Constitution, or whatever else that is needed. No? So we are there because the present situation right now is such that people are starting to ask themselves, what is it in it for us for the future? Is it status quo, or should it be an opportunity for change? No? Now, I know you are a change advocate, and so am I, no? Because I have always rejected the status quo because of the oligarchy. Now, I'd like to give you the opportunity to give your thoughts, and then we can go into a discussion on it. Gil, go ahead.
Well, definitely, I would push for taking the opportunity to introduce fundamental changes to our present setup. Because my position right now is that we do not have a legitimate constitution. The present 1987 constitution has been exposed on two historic occasions as an imposition on the Filipino people by a foreign intervenor in our political affairs. I'm talking about the 1989 coup of Gregorio Honasan. He was then a colonel.
Yes.
And at that point, in October of 1989, these Filipino forces already had control of all the military assets of the country. At that point, when they were about to enter Malacanang, President Cory Aquino called Dan Quayle of the United States and asked for support.
He was Vice President Dan Quayle.
He was Vice President Dan Quayle because George Herbert Bush, the father, was on a summit meeting, I think, in Europe.
Right. Yeah.
It was Vice President Dan Quayle in charge of the American government at the time. And the call was relayed to Dan Quayle, and he was the one who made the decision to respond to the overflight request or the support request of President Cory Aquino. There are records which show that the order or the request of President Cory Aquino included the bombing of the troops that are surrounding Malacanang at that time. That portion of the request, because of the possible danger to civilian elements around the area, was refused by Dan Quayle. But I understood from anecdotal recounting of this event that the overflight of the Americans resulted in the death of a Filipino Air Force pilot.
Right. Yeah. In Sangli.
Which was hushed at the time.
Yes.
And not easily published. Therefore, that particular incident, wherein it was the force of arms of a foreign power which preserved the presidency of Cory Aquino under the 1987 Constitution, shows and exposes the 1987 Constitution as an imposition, a foreign imposition, a neo-colonial constitution imposed by the United States on us, and confirmed our vassalage status as subsidiary to the principal sovereignty of the United States. That is the first count against this 1987 Constitution, dramatically exposed by the 1989 coup.
Okay.
A previous count against it is the intervention of the Americans in 1986, when they abducted President Marcos. Instead of bringing him to Hawaii, they brought him to Hawaii. That again shows that it was the intervention of American arms which completed the takeover of the government of Marcos by Cory Aquino. It was not the success of Philippine arms. Now, let us put this in perspective. Let us compare constitutions and constitutionalism.
Yeah.
And let us compare two constitutions. During World War II, the Philippines was governed by J.P. Laurel as president under a Philippine constitution. That constitution was supported and sworn to by the first Captain General of the Philippines, Artemio Ricarte. He swore allegiance to that Philippine Constitution. So did President Emilio Aguinaldo. They swore allegiance to this Laurel Constitution. Now, what justified the substitution of that Constitution with the reversion to the American Constitution of 1935? It was the victory of arms of the Americans over the Japanese which brought that about. But this points out the reality that the Laurel Constitution and the 1935 constitutions are just similarly exposed as puppet constitutions, although sponsored by different conquering powers. That has to be understood in our history, and nobody talks about that. Even the allegiance that was given by President Emilio Aguinaldo to this Laurel Constitution, and the allegiance given by Artemio Ricarte, who came in with the Homa forces of the Japanese Imperial Army in 1940, 1941, is all touched up. But this will expose to you the continued vassalage of the Philippine government to American arms. And these American arms intervened in 1986, and these American arms again intervened in 1989.
Yeah.
So this exposes the defects of the current Constitution. Those two interventions, they are no different than the interventions of the Americans in 1945 when they reimposed the American puppet constitution to substitute for the Japanese puppet constitution. This is a very important seminal argument in our history which is not discussed, not even taught in our schools, but we have to understand this. Another count against the 1987 Constitution was how it was broken in 2001.
Gil, let me interject just a question before you go to that portion. You're saying 1935 was American imposed, 1940 was Japanese imposed, 1945 was American imposed, and so is the 1987 as American imposed Constitution.
Correct.
You left out 1973.
Well, 1973 was an attempt of President Marcos to Philippinize the Philippine Constitution. He made an effort to correct these things and was shifting the country to parliamentary status, which was the spirit of the Malolos Constitution, the 1899 Constitution.
Yeah. And
So
this, in effect,
that was the background of the 1973 Constitution. However, the flaw of the 1973 Constitution was its derivative etymology or legal etymology came from the 1935 Constitution. And the 1935 Constitution never repealed the 1899 Philippine Constitution.
Okay.
Yes. So the reason for that is that Clara Embrecto himself was opposing it.
Yes.
And given the patriotism at the time of those who were forced to participate in the 1935 Constitutional Convention, they will oppose a direct repeal of the 1899 Constitution. So that repeal never happened.
Okay. So the flaw of the 1973 is that substantially it was based on the 1935 Constitution, which was already American imposed. So therefore, it somehow carried over to the 1973 as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, correct. The taint of the flaw of the 1935 Constitution was inherited by the 1973 Constitution.
Okay. Now you are going to your next topic, how it was violated, you said?
Well, legal constructionists argue that when, and I'm not a lawyer, so I will be open to suggestions from those who know constitutional law. They say that when the Constitution is broken, it can never be put together again. Remember the nursery rhyme,
Humpty Dumpty.
Humpty Dumpty?
Yeah.
Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty Dumpty together again.
Yep.
In 2001, our Constitution had a great fall. This 1987 Constitution had a great fall. On top of its defects already, which I mentioned, in the 1986 imposition of it by the Americans, and the 1989 reimposition of the writ of that Constitution when Vice President Dan Quayle authorized the support to the prisoner's request of President Cory Aquino to intervene in Philippine affairs. So now, in 2001, a coup d'etat, a naked grab for power, was launched by elements who opposed ERAP. And mind you, the election of ERAP in 1998 was the cleanest election because in 1998, our COMELEC did not have padded votes because it was just cleaned up by the PIRMA effort of President Gil Ramos.
Yeah,
And that
but-
Monday,
just to be clear,
from the people.
just to
And
be
this was converted.
here, I just wanted that a little clearer. No? President Ramos decided to clean up the voters list because that means na binawasan niya ng mga dagdag na dinagdag na ng mga nasa botante, no? Dahil meron siyang ibang intention. He wanted the voters list to go down because he wanted to use the initiative, yung tinatawag na People's Initiative provision sa Constitution na pwedeng gamitin para ipagpatuloy yung kanyang sarili as the head of government. Ngayon, si Ramos decided to clean. In other words, binawasan na niya yung mga fake na voters na nasa listahan ng COMELEC para bumaba at mas madali nang makuha yung porsyento ng People's Initiative para gawin siyang Prime Minister o continuation as a President. It was self-serving that he did it, but nevertheless, nalinis yung voters list. I just wanted that very clear. Here, am I correct there?
That's correct, because the 1992 voters list wherein President Fidel Ramos cheated Miriam Defensor Santiago out of his her presidential victory was padded with more than 1 million votes.
Uh-huh.
And or more, much more than that, because later on, he padded it some more during the in-between elections, the midterm elections before 1998.
Uh-huh.
That was around 1994, I think, or 1995, wherein there was another election and the padding was increased because of the narrow victory, because of the cheating done in 1992. President Ramos wanted his senators to win overwhelmingly in 1995. So that was when that Bawas thing,
Yes,
became very famous, and that was when Nene Pimentel, the late Senator Nene Pimentel, became a notorious victim, or rather a well-known victim of the Dagdag Bawas operations of Fidel Ramos in 1995.
Yeah.
So, between 1995 and 1998, the PIRMA was launched, which you were referring to.
Yes.
This process of PIRMA, or People's Initiative, requires that you have 3% of the voters signing a petition per district. As you said, to make it easier for the PIRMA to succeed, Ramos made the effort to clean up the election list. And from 1995 to 1998, around 5 million votes were purged from the voters list. This is a matter of public record which can be verified.
Uh-huh.
This is shown in the studies I made with public records right now of the COMELEC. And right now, my estimate of the padded votes in the current voters list of the COMELEC is at a minimum of around 12 million to around 14 million maximum.
Wow. There are
This is the accumulated padding that has been there. Of course, they will try to cover it up. And they have been so silent about it. It's been studiously ignored. But that reality is there. It's proven by documented public statements and public figures in government. I have published these figures in the internet. It's been there for about a year now. And I'm challenging Vera Files, I'm challenging Rappler, I'm challenging any fact-finding group to expose it as fake. Nobody has done it so far.
Just again, to clarify and put it into context, what exactly you're saying here, Gil. That, for example, if we had 100 million Filipinos, which we are over, an example is if there were 50 million people who actually voted, it is very possible that the COMELEC will come out with something like 65 million votes cast. 15 million votes of which are actually those that have been padded for their use in order to put it on certain candidates whom they feel whom they were paid to make them win. That's what you mean by the padded votes, hindi ba?
Yeah, the padded votes are used by them to manipulate results, particularly in margins that can be covered by the existing padded votes. Correct. But right now, the voters' participation record of the COMELEC shows that our voting, the voters that participated in the last 2019 elections is 43%, 43 million, I think, less than the actual registered voters.
Yes.
But the dramatic thing that exposes this anomaly of registration in the COMELEC and this is the largest padding ever happened during this term of this current chairman, this chairman Sharif. The population of the country grew by, I think, roughly only 4% between 2016 and 2019. But and then out of that growth, only a certain portion of that would be age qualified to register as new voters. However, it's a matter of public record that between 2016 and 2019, the number of registered voters in the COMELEC increased by a much larger percentage than the growth of the population.
Correct.
Working out a figure that the expected registrants based on these demographics was just around 2.2 million. But those that registered, I think, increase in registry was about 9 to 10 million.
Alam niyo po, ito pong pinag-uusapan natin ni Gil Ramos ngayon. Kanya medyo pinabayan natin pag-usapan ng mabuti itong sa mga padded votes tsaka sa COMELEC. Dahil po ang COMELEC is a constitutional body. No? At hindi mo po mabubuwag itong COMELEC kung hindi ka mag-iisip na magpalit ng konstitusyon. Yan po ang ating papunta po tayo dyan sa ganyang klaseng diskusyon. Kanya po ilinabas ni kaibigan Gil Ramos itong problema tungkol sa ating konstitusyon. Itong mga konstitusyon po ng 1986-87, pati na rin ng 73, pati na rin yung 45, yung 40, pati yung 1935. Lahat po yan ay konstitusyon na ipinataw sa atin lang ng mga dayuhan. Isang beses ng Hapon at karamihan ng mga Amerikano. Pero isang konstitusyon natin, isang saligang batas natin na hindi nila na-abrogate, hindi nila na pawalang bisa. Normally kasi, pag nagkaroon ka ng isang saligang batas, tapos papalitan mo with another saligang batas, another constitution, ina-abrogate napapalitan o dinedeklara na yung dating constitution is no longer enforced or no longer the law of the land. Yung pong ganyan na sitwasyon hanggang 1935 po, lahat yung pong mga constitution nun, pwera lang ngayon yung 1986 ni Corazon Aquino, are abrogated. Pero yung 1899 Constitution, at bibigyan po tayo ng paliwanag ngayon ni Gil Ramos, ay hindi po napalitan at wala pong deklarasyon na it is no longer enforced. Go ahead, Gil.
Nagsimula akong kwento tungkol sa nangyari noong 2001. Kasi ang sinasabi ng mga magagaling na abogado na legal constructionists sa constitutional law, pag basagin mo ang isang constitution, hindi mo na ulit mabubuo yan. Noong 2001, nabasag yung ating constitution. Nag-invento itong si Hilario Davide, ang tawag sa kanya ay Hilarious Davide sometimes, na sinasabing constructive resignation ni ERAP. Si ERAP daw ay nag-resign dahil umalis sa Malacanang.
Meron siyang inimbentong salita.
Constructive resignation daw. Si Digong, laging umaalis sa Malacanang, laging nasa Davao. Hindi naman nagko-constructive resignation. Ibig sabihin, kalokohan lang yun. Katulad din ang ginawa ni President Marcos. noon para makaiwas sa confrontation doon sa mga nagdedemonstrasyon sa Malacanang. Gusto niya umalis sa Malacanang. At since ang transport niya ay medyo iffy at that point, dahil hindi niya alam kung sino ang loyal sa kanya, umayag siyang sumakay doon sa mga helicopter ng Amerikano. Eh dinala siya sa Hawaii, hindi sa Hawaii. Ganyan din ngayon dito sa itong ating 2001 Constitution, nag-invento itong si Hilario Davide ng constructive resignation. Hindi naman nag-resign sa ERAP.
Hindi siya nag-resign.
Kaya ikaw ay naging isang miyembro ng kabinete na ERAP. Hindi nag-resign ang presidente ERAP.
Hindi.
Umiiwas lang siya na magkaroon ng gulo kaya umaalis siya sa Malacanang. Pero sinabi nila nag-resign. At ngayon, nung ginawa nila yun, ang sumunod na sitwasyon, nagpatuloy pa rin sila sa paggamit ng 1987 Constitution, pero basag na yung Constitution na yun. Kaya lang, what was sustaining it was this de facto political settlement among the political actors. The military brass, which withdrew support from the president, agreed to it. The political class agreed to it. The Supreme Court agreed to it. So it was an ad hoc political settlement which divided power among themselves in influence. And when this power was divided properly, the consensus was sustained, we continued to have this 1987 Constitution, and everybody pretended that it has never been broken in 2001. But it's broken. Humpty Dumpty could not be put together again. That's what some writers told. We can perhaps survive physical and financial corruption, but we cannot survive a corrupted constitution. And that was the constitution of in 2001 was corrupted. Aside from the defects I already pointed out, with this 1987 constitution as an imposition by a foreign power on us, confirming our vassalage as a nation. In 1986, as well as in 1989, this defect again of the Constitution, which made it a broken Constitution, equivalent to what some people call now just toilet paper, happened in 2001. Therefore, we could argue now that if it was the military brass who initiated this corruption of the Constitution in 2001 because of the withdrawal of support from the executive. As matters evolved after 2001, and with the introduction of automated elections in 2010, this 1987 Constitution was again used by certain political actors in the country to subvert the electoral sovereignty of the Filipino people. This is well documented in the researches done by Gwen Chong in 2010. That was the year when this automated election system was imposed. What happened through the years from 2010, then to 2016, and then now to the coming elections of 2022? The vulnerability of the system and the whole COMELEC apparatus have been subjected to regulatory capture by cheating syndicates. And as you have said, these cheating syndicates, which included the Smartmatic operatives, now embedded inside the COMELEC, derives their protection from these constitutional provisions which designates the COMELEC as an independent constitutional body. And it becomes so difficult to eject them out of this. When any congressional investigation is done, and anybody exposes this, all members of the political class who are forced to become partners in crime in the process of their lust to get elected rushed to the support of the COMELEC operatives. And no investigation of these matters proceed. Even now, dead ma sila. They're doing this strategy of studied ignorance. They're just ignoring this padded vote which has accumulated through the years in the COMELEC. Because after 1998, when we had a clean slate because of the unintended pirma purging of Gil Ramos, when Benjamin Abalos came in, he brought in padded votes with a vengeance, preparing for the 2004 Hello Garcia scandal of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, when she cheated Fernando Poe Jr. These things introduced by Abalos was heightened also by subsequent commissioners. And now the drama was further exacerbated by Andres Angribel Bautista when he colluded to subvert the people's will again in 2016. At that time, in 2016, the padded votes inside COMELEC was about, in my estimate, 5.6 million. That is why we have anecdotal stories saying that the actual vote of President Digong was about 21 million. But then they tried to shade this by padding the votes of Arab of this guy Mar to make him a second placer. But actually, they used these padded votes to manipulate the vote of Digong down to just 16 million. So that is something that is very difficult to prove because of the fact that this COMELEC doesn't even want to share their data, even with the watch group of the NAMFREL when it was requested by former COMELEC Commissioner Gas Lagman. They do not want to share that. They keep it to themselves. You could not easily get data from the COMELEC because they shield you from that. However, they could not shield the fact that they have been padding this vote. If you just look at the totals of population growth and the growth of the registry of voters. That is something that they cannot answer. Up to now, they're so silent about it. And that shows you that since 2010, since the evolution of the 2001 political settlement or political agreement of the political actors, the political firmament of the country in terms of elected officials have become so corrupted, and that the political settlement of 2001 preserving a pretend charade of having a legitimate 1987 constitution can no longer hold. Right now, the military should withdraw support from that political settlement of 2001 to correct a historical mistake. If the president joins them in that withdrawal, then the whole system of cheating and electoral assault of the sovereignty of the people in elections will be corrected easily, because we can revert to the 1899 Philippine Constitution to continue a new era, a reset button, without imposing a military dictatorship on the nation. If the president joins the military, President Digong joins the military in withdrawing support to that political consensus, to that bastardized agreement done in 2001, then the transition becomes smoother. President Digong now governs under the 1899 Constitution, and that 1899 Constitution gives him the presidential powers of legislation shared with the unicameral assembly under that Constitution. he therefore can legislate by decree and begin to update the Constitution for the modern requirements that we need. Also use that decree making powers of his under that Constitution to legitimately adopt municipal laws so that the existing systems can continue. And then he can also clean up the country's bureaucracy and elected set of officials, because everybody who swears to the Constitution of 1899 will be protected by law unless positions or their particular legal situation does not conform with the letter and the spirit of the 1899 Philippine Constitution. But then, if they refuse to swear allegiance to this shift, which the military and the president can do anytime right now, then they dismiss themselves automatically from public service, and they're out of positions anymore. This follows for all Supreme Court justices and all other judiciary elements under the Supreme Court. This follows for the elected officials in the Senate as well as in the Congress, who will now sit as unicameral members of the Assembly under the 1899 Constitution.
Well,
this follows for any element in the military who would refuse to swear allegiance to the 1899 Constitution. Yes.
Of course, I understand you. Conceptually, this is really what it all means. But there are, I think, three major aspects that need to be considered here. What you're saying as to what the military should do, first, they should accept the 1899 Constitution. They have to first understand exactly what you are saying. Now, it is not just one of them. It is not just two or three of them. You're talking about a military as an institution, which means you're going to have to educate quite a number of officers in the armed forces of the Philippines. Number two, what you're saying has to be fully understood and appreciated by the President of the Republic, Mr. Duterte. Now, considering the present situation and considering the realities, like what he is, what his abilities are, and what his present situation is, facing all of these problems about the COVID, even about the problems of oligarchs and so on and so forth, and looking at the economy and how it's going to turn out after this, making the president appreciate this, that to move to the 1899 Constitution, seems to me a bit difficult. Number three is the people. Granted that the majority of our people are not going to fully understand the implications and the impact of what you're saying, which, by the way, don't get me wrong, I agree with what you're saying. But granted that the majority, I would hope that at the very least, the academe, the business sector, the other sectors, including the other institutions like the religious sector of the different religions, must at least understand the basics, the basic principles of what you are saying. Now, this takes time. This takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of people that you're going to have to train to try to explain this to them. What I'm trying to say is not there a better and more efficient way of doing this? Because time is against us. we are in a situation where so many things are happening, so many sectors are in control of governance, and so many corrupt politicians are intending to perpetrate themselves. And DICOM has a very limited term, which another 2 or 3 years, or even less because of his health conditions. So is not there a better and more efficient way or a quicker way to be able to do this?
There is.
Yeah.
But just under, even without discussing the merits of adopting the 1899 Constitution, it's just a question of understanding how the 1987 Constitution broke down in 2001. And recognizing the fact that the 1987 Constitution is no longer a legitimate Constitution, but just a de facto Constitution upheld by an ad hoc political settlement between the significant actors of the Philippine polity. And principal actor in this that upheld the political settlement of 2001 was the military brass. If suddenly the military brass now say, we no longer want this political settlement, which was done in 2001, we are withdrawing support to that political settlement, then the whole shebang breaks down. And that creates a situation of hiatus, a vacuum. Now, if we don't have a 1987 Constitution that is valid, what Constitution do we have? We revert to the common law of Britain, which follows a governance without a written Constitution. But the governance in Britain uses a seminal document in the history, the Magna Carta, wherein the kings began to give their power to the burgher class or to the merchant class that was lending money to the monarchy. In the absence of the Constitution, because of the recognition that now this 1987 Constitution is just a piece of toilet paper that has been already destroyed by the 2001 event, what is there to substitute for it? That's the only reason why we go to our seminal document in our history, which is the 1899 Philippine Constitution. That is the equivalent of our Magna Carta. That is the gift given to us by our forefathers, ratified with their blood, sweat, and tears. We can use that now in this interregnum to reset our society and organize our society for all of this COVID and all that kind of stuff. The practical utility of the shift is the fact that legitimately the current president, if he goes with that shift, will be able to govern by presidential decree legally without declaring martial law, and the military can participate with him without operating under a military dictatorship. This is a gift of our history. This is a gift of our forefathers. We should use it. We should use it to face the challenge of the present day.
What I can see here is that there is now a rationalization of what can be if there is a change in government or change in governance, because there are people like before you came out, I was explaining that there are different groups calling for a revolutionary government. No? But the problem with revolutionary government is that these people that are calling for it have different reasons for calling for it. No? And this is why it's a bit difficult to look for the proper vehicle. I am personally, at this point, when I see that the three branches of government no longer function to promote the general welfare, to achieve the common good, and that there is no longer any institution in government that people can seek redress, I say that it is incumbent upon us to try to move towards a new constitution and declaring this government as ineffective. Now, however, if you still have a President Duterte whose intentions are noble and his heart is in the right place, and if we still have the military who are not yet corrupted and not yet pushed towards the attractions that the oligarchy are giving them when they retire. You know, many of these generals are being given nice positions by the oligarchy to become their vice president in charge of security and whatever it is. That is their retirement. Now, if they do not look at that, instead look at saving this nation, and if they move with the same motivation, that if you're going to move, they can put the 1899 Constitution in place, at the same time address ourselves to the true enemies of society, which we in the KDP have always singled out to be the oligarchy. The oligarchy which is in control of government. The oligarchy which will be in control even of the choice of president in the near future. We have to dismantle that. Now, if that is seen to be the true enemy of the society right now, and in order to do that and effect the changes that you say, use the 1899 Constitution to come up with the decrees that are necessary, then this is the way I would see it happen. Because the people are not going to jump at the 1899 Constitution as a rallying point. The people are going to go after the oligarchs because of the things that have been being done to them for such a long time. You can feel it. You can feel that one, right?
The suspension decrees that will be issued, it is just the 1899 Constitution is just used as an instrumentality to create this decrees to free the country from the oligarchy.
Yes.
And so that will be the one, but the legal cover, even in the United Nations, is the principle of self-determination by a people, because our document, the 1899 Constitution, is a legal document and has to be respected even in the international community.
Okay.
That provides us legal cover from foreign intervention, because now, learning from our lessons on history, we now have our own military organization, a sovereign military organization, not beholden to any foreign power, imposing and supporting the historic document forged by our founding fathers. Mm-hmm. The crucial point here is the ability of the sitting president, whoever occupies the presidency under the 1899 Constitution, to legislate by decree to correct the oligarchic dominance in our society right now. Our oligarchy controls everything. It controls principally the Comelec. It controls the process of elections of our leaders. It has even blocked the process of any peaceful avenue to change our constitution, because you do it through mechanisms controlled by the Comelec.
Right.
So the only way to change our constitution in a situation where the Comelec is constitutionally protected and is under the thumb of oligarchs who are constantly exploiting the people to rent-seeking arrangements, is for this Gordian knot to be cut. And that process of recognizing the 2001 event as an event that broke this 1987 Constitution, and therefore it is a Constitution that has no legal standing anymore, except for the de facto political settlement that was forged in 2001, that would be the way to break out of our embassy. By saying that now, hey, we are the military, we are enlightened, we know what to do now. We don't want that political settlement anymore that was forged in 2001. We are now taking over and using the switch of allegiance to the 1899 Constitution to correct the current situation.
And as such, you're already a constitutionally formed government, right?
Yes, you have an immediate constitutionally formed government. The Philippine Army celebrates its anniversary for 124 years. The Philippine Army derives its descent originally
From the
1897 Katipunan.
Right.
That is why they have those years of 124 in their anniversary dates. Their first leader recognized is Captain General Artemio Ricarte. And then later on, you have a list, even if you go to their website, they go back to this history. They are the military force that was originally in allegiance with the 1899 Philippine Constitution.
Right.
They are just going back to their historical roots by affirming that allegiance once more to the 1899 Philippine Constitution.
Okay.
They are the Katipunan.
Yeah.
Just named the Philippine Army right now.
Okay, let me ask the next question. Okay, this is a picture of General Ricarte, which we're showing our viewers right now. He was a handsome fellow. Now, I ask you the question here. What are your expectations of President Duterte between now and 2022 to address this particular point? Do you think he is willing and able and, well, and with the right amount of moral courage to move towards that direction? Second, you have been, you're familiar with certain personalities in the military brass. Do you think that they have the capability to move towards that direction as well?
On the first question of the political will of the president to do something about it, I think the latent desire of the president to have real structural change in the country persists. However, ideas like ours, this one that we're discussing right now, has not yet permeated the mainstream discussion of politics in the country. And our job is to make that part of the seminal discussions and part of the cards and part of the alternative actions or path that the president can take. I think if he spends time to recognize this and discuss this and study this, he would be inclined. He has that possibility of adopting this before 2022, before the elections of 2022. So that remains as something that depends on his desire to do it and his capability to ignore the vested groups that are now circulating and gravitating around Sara Duterte. Because these vested groups around Sara Duterte has a different agenda than President Duterte himself.
I agree. Now, if President Duterte is inclined to move in accordance with what we are saying here about the 1899 Constitution, that means there will be no elections on 2022.
It's possible in 2022 we can have local elections.
Local.
But this time, local elections will be done in separate schedules and not on a nationwide basis.
Yeah.
Similar to the way local elections are held in the United States. So that we can really focus on a particular geographic area and assure that there will be clean elections in that area.
Right.
And the synergy between these national elections for national leadership and the local election choices would be easily dichotomized. And that corruption synergy between these two would be dispelled.
Yeah. But
It will also give us the chance to begin to assimilate into our fold patriotic commanders of the NPA who would like to return to the fold of law. Gringo Honasan had a coup, and then he became a senator. Trillanes did the same thing. He became a senator. These patriotic NPAs who are now returning to the fold of law should be given the chance to run for mayor or barangay captain in their localities. And if the people choose them, as long as they lay down their arms, then they should be the mayors. They should be the local leaders chosen by the people.
yeah, but you know, let me just interject. The examples you gave, like Trillanes and Honasan, they were not at war with the army and they were not killing people. They did not promote progressive taxation and intimidated barrios for their particular cause. No? This is the problem, that they had committed, these NPAs, whoever they are, had committed crime. No? Maybe what you mean is maybe what you mean as such is that the Communist Party of the Philippines can register as a bona fide political party. No? And that they, whoever it is that believes in in that ideology, may participate in the electoral process. But those people that had committed crimes, you know, and are clearly involved in these activities, maybe that is going to be very difficult. All of a sudden, if somebody had executed 10 people in some place, all of a sudden he's running for mayor of that place. It's going to be very difficult to accept as far as the people are concerned. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you that the Communist Party of the Philippines, if they make themselves into a bona fide political party, trying to sell ideas to the people, just as any other political party with ideas, that is part of a whole functioning democracy, but that is a. I don't want to get into a debate about that. I'm just making a comment on what you're saying. But we were at that on issue about the president, and that if he is willing and able, there will be no national elections. Remember, the 1899 is a parliament, right?
Yes.
So if it is a parliament, then there could be elections, because a parliament is technically and functionally a local elections.
Yes, there will be no presidential election
No
in
presidential.
2002.
However, you did.
2027.
However, in the assembly, you can come up with a prime minister.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Therefore, there will be no, how do you say it, vacancy, or there will be no vacancy in as far as leadership is concerned. No.
You mean to say there will be no vacuum?
There will be no vacuum, yes. There will be no
That's
vacuum.
correct.
And there could be a continuance of activities. There will be changes.
Yeah.
There
That's
will-
also what I mean.
Okay.
When the fiasco of 2001 is recognized, and we declare the 1987 Constitution for what it is, then there will be no constitutional vacuum. Because by adopting immediately the 1899 Constitution, we are within constitutional law again.
Yes, I agree. Now the next point, again, the military. Are you confident that this could be explained to the military brass and appreciated by them in the context that you're presenting it?
Well, I have received indications that the people who are high up in the military command, even up to the office of the Department of Defense, are studying the ramifications of a shift to the 1899 Philippine Constitution.
Which is good. Actually, I just wanted to add on this additional insight. You and I are not going to be talking like this about these particular issues if not for Duterte in 2016 informally declaring our independence and sovereignty when he cursed Obama to tell him to go to hell. This particular incident is what actually opened up our possibilities and opened up our doors to improve relationships with China and Russia without really severing our relationships with the United States. Now we are talking about an independent nation. We have now criticized in your presentation how over the whole years, over 100 years, that we have been subjugated and our laws have been in effect controlled by foreign powers. But going back to the 1899 Constitution is precisely a further declaration of our independence and our sovereignty as a nation. And this insight, this concept is very, very important for all Filipinos to understand. That we were a virtual independent nation all these years. Virtual, because we were not really independent. Independence that is a bullshit concept when we know that the United States, the IMF, the World Bank, the money lenders of the world, the big businesses that were coming in, and now the oligarchy are in control of our lives. But this is a declaration of our sovereignty. And a follow-up, not just of the 1899 heroes, a follow-up on what Duterte had done when he told Obama to go to hell and we are no longer your colony. And when we decide to come up with a new government, but using the 1899 Constitution, it is precisely our final say that we are indeed a sovereign nation. That is the way I understand and the way I appreciate what you're saying here.
That's correct. And it is poignant that President Duterte brought out the picture of the massacre of Bodahu when he sort of remarked against the insults hurled on him by President Obama. It is not well understood or known that the Philippine-American War lasted from 1899 to 1916. In our history books, they separate these events as the saying that the 1902 capture of Aguinaldo ended the Philippine-American War. No, it did not. General Malvar continued. But because of the Juez de Cuchillo and the burning of Samar and the burning of his properties as well of the Batangueños, Malvar, and later on, the abandonment of the Philippine land-owning process, of the support of the revolution once the Americans promised recognition of their property rights, it forced Malvar to surrender. And then Macario Sakay took over. But he was also executed later on through arrested through false pretenses, and executed later on under the Brigandage Act of the Americans, meaning to say if you are somebody who is not following the Americans, even if you're saying you're a revolutionary, you'll be executed as a bandit. He was killed as a bandit. Bodahu happened later on. But now, historians who were, of course, controlled by the Americans, said, okay, that's a different thing now. That's not the pacification of the Moros. But that's part of our effort of independence. Bodahu was in resistance to the American rule.
You will read it.
And then also the incident, the fight in Bagsak. Dato Ampil can be considered our last general who resisted the Americans. He fought in Bagsak, and they were massacred by General Persing.
Right.
And that is only after the death of Dato Ampil of Bagsak that we could say that our country has become fully controlled almost by the Americans. But that was something to show you that Filipinos resisted American rule for a very long time.
Yeah, well, up to now, that spirit, I suppose, lives in many of us, and the spirit of getting comfort in being subjugated is also present among other Filipinos who have gotten so used to being subjugated. They've gotten so used to being a colony.
You need to say it's like a woman getting so used to being raped that she starts to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's called the Stockholm Syndrome. We have been so overwhelmed by the control of these people that we get to love those that are controlling us. No? The Stockholm Syndrome is like that. But it's a pity that such people still exist, despite the fact that so much hardship has been caused by the position of economic programs, imposition of so many other political control of political leaders. This translated very much into suffering of our people.
Yes, when I begin to reflect on that and sort of begin to entertain defeatist attitudes in this continued fight that we are waging,
Yeah.
I just refer to the My favorite stanza in the poem,
Yeah.
in the Charles Derbyshire translation of Rizal. You remember that stanza?
No, go ahead.
My dreams when life first opened to me. My dreams when the hope of youth beat high
Yeah.
was to see thy loved face, oh pearl of the Orient seas,
Yeah.
from gloom and grief, from care and sorrow free. No blush in thy brow, no tear in thine eye.
Very good. Well, were you reading that or did you memorize that?
That's from memory.
Okay, I'm just kidding. But the original was, of course, in Spanish, wasn't it?
Yes, but the translation of Rizal of Derbyshire was more beautiful than the Spanish original.
I see. Okay.
And also the translation of Bonifacio of that stanza is also very beautiful in Tagalog.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Do you know it in Tagalog? Yeah.
I haven't fully memorized it
Okay.
in Tagalog.
We'll try to research it. We have some messages coming from our listeners and viewers. Itos will do the honors to read to us what it is, and if we need to react, just listen in here. And that's Itos
Yeah,
there.
okay. Go ahead.
That's Itos there on the screen now. So,
Okay, basahin po natin yung mga mensahe natin dito sa ating katipunan.
louder.
Paulo F. Alontaga, mayang gabi sa inyong tanan, mga Repa Pips. Arvin J. saying good evening. Lourdes Galay, gandang gabi po. Rosalinda Coxon Francisco, good evening po, Sir Butch Valdes. Si Eric Ortiz, good evening po. Masagana 99, ginagawa lang gatasan ng mga big pharma at pribadong ospital ang mga oligarchs ng PhilHealth. Dapat buhusan ng pondo ang gobyerno, pondo ang government hospitals at magtayo pa ng maraming tertiary government-owned mega hospital from Mindanao to Luzon. Wala kasing inatupag ang mga administrasyon kundi privatization. You want to react to that?
Yes, I agree with Masagana 99. One of the things that we've been saying even before this COVID thing. As a matter of fact, for the past couple of decades, we have already been trying to accumulate data with some difficulty as to number of hospitals and number of beds per every 10,000 Filipinos. It was very difficult to try to get, and we could only do it by guessing, by extrapolation, because the government didn't have any statistics on this. No. The other thing that was wrong as far as I'm concerned was the major move on the part of government to export our doctors and our nurses. No. In order for them to be able to generate enough foreign exchange to be able to and send it over here to prop up our economy. Our economy is propped up by the OFWs. This is not the way to run a country, a nation. Everything must be sustained by its own people. Anything extra will precisely be that, extra, for export and for assistance to other countries. But all of our energies and all of our competence and know-how must be focused on generating the development of our country. So I agree with Masagana 99.
Si Gil, you want to say that?
Hey, you want to say something?
Masagana 99 addresses something that is very important, food security. And this is something that has been neglected by an oligarch-controlled governance that we have in the country. They became more interested in the quick buck that they can make to raise importations. That is why we never achieved the kind of self-sufficiency that was achieved during the time of Marcos. We now have to go back to this, protect a strong agricultural sector, and even have a government effort to produce food for the military for themselves in military camps. That should be done. When the Philippine-American War was being waged, the first order of business that is given by generals in the area is to secure food for the people. At that time, our forest was still lush. Our forest has not yet been depleted by the rapacious collaborative efforts between American and Filipino timber companies. There was a lot of food from the forest. And the Filipino generals fighting the Philippine-American War always made sure that in the process of waging their war, they don't destroy these natural food sources for the people. That has now been neglected. But again, in 1999, it's an effort to revive that.
Okay.
It should be done again. And we should have home gardens. We should have a growing process, relying on our food, producing food for ourselves.
Very good. Next.
Okay, continuing. Freddy Oredina. Not all senior citizens are automatically into what they call maintenance drugs. It was called so that you will maintain taking drugs and sickness. It will damage organs and doctors will say complication or side effect. So we need health experts, not medical experts connected to big pharma, run by evils promoting depopulation. Drugs shorten the lifespan of humans. Winda Corpus, good evening sir, ingat po lahat. Remy Montemayor, maayo po, Bengi Sir Butch Valdes.
Yes, good evening.
Cesar Soberan, no. Good evening mga katipon, ano po kaya dahilan, bakit hindi ma-flatten ang curve? You want to take this?
Well, yung flattening of the curve dito sa ano is how do you say it? It's an objective of every country. No? We're not too sure, however, from where we are. In other words, kung hindi ka sigurado sa mga datos mo, no? Hindi ka rin sigurado kung nagpa-flatten na nga yung curve, no? Tapos hindi ka pa sigurado kasi bakit hindi tayo sigurado? Kasi walang talagang mekanismo na pinupuntahan ang mga datos na papuntang ganyan, papunta sa Department of Health. Hindi natin alam exactly kung saan kumukuha ng datos ang Department of Health. Meron tayong datos kung sino yung mga may sakit at ganyan sa mga hospital natin dito sa Metro Manila. No? Pero palagay ko, ang Department of Health ay walang connection sa lahat ng hospital sa buong bansa, no? Na makukuha nila yung tama. Kanya nakakapagduda itong datos natin kung saan tayo manggagaling dito sa peak ng curve. Tapos sasabihin nila, yan, nagpa-flatten na yung curve. Kasi pag sinabi lang nagpa-flatten, nakaka-nervous po dahil alam natin palpak yung datos no? This is my feeling about the Department of Health. Next.
Ryan Sally, good morning. Professor Butch Valdes and KDP watching from California, USA.
Yeah.
Mukhtar Sahban, Sir Valdez, mabuhay po kayo. Cesar Soberano, the WHO has warned for a second and even third wave of the virus.
Yeah.
Pandemic worldwide. Paano po kaya nagpaplano ngayon ng gobyerno with DOH sa posibilidad ng ganito?
Well, as of now, wala pa ako nakikitang plano talaga at kapasidad ng ating gobyerno harapin itong mga darating na panahon. para bagang nagdadasal na lang tayo na magkaroon ng miracle drug para magamit natin at ibigay natin sa ating mga mamamayan. By the way, Gil, you can interject anytime if you want to add something to what I'm saying.
Yes, mostly the concerns are about the COVID things, and right now, even in the United States, it's just beginning to perhaps flatten a bit. But if more developed countries with mature health infrastructures are having difficulty meeting this challenge of the pandemic, it's going to be much more challenging in a situation like the Philippines, which has been ravaged by corruption for so many years, such that our health infrastructures are not adequate to meet the needs required when a pandemic happens like this.
Right.
For a very long time, for several weeks, I've been observing data from the World Odometer website, and what I was seeing for the first weeks is that there were more people dying than recovering in the Philippines. It was only the preventive measures of this social distancing which avoid much wider impact on the population. It was only recently when finally at some point maybe our health people got their act together that we saw more recoveries than death in COVID in the Philippines. It's good that that has happened. But these events here, those relatives Matamais LGU, the irrational decisions made by our health officers like this guy, Duque, who is in charge of health, they should serve as learning experiences so that we can get our health capabilities better organized for the future.
Okay.
Okay.
Continue.
Yeah.
Okay, hi from Marites Raquel from Lebanon. Ernie Ocampo, Arvin De Los Santos, and Maribeth Sunier Ranyakan. Good evening po. Maribeth is from Iloilo. Alicia Gibel, watching from Germany. Please not allow oligarch to control our political power.
Yes.
Jose Lavin, tama po kayo Sir Butch, no to neoliberal. Sir Butch, kayo po ba'y galing sa pamilya ni Jose Pedro Abad Santos? Yes.
Opo, lolo ko po siya.
Sana paliwanag din sir ang long-term plan ng KDP. Yan.
Well, kung yung buong long-term plan ng KDP, itutuloy po namin. Alam nyo, partido, kami po ay isang political party, Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino. Pero meron po tayong pinanindigan ng mga prinsipyo at tuloy-tuloy po natin isasiwalat ito sa ating mga mamamayan. No? Dahil ang Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino, tuloy-tuloy ang pakipag-usap sa ating mga mamamayan, sharing information and getting information from them, no? With or without elections. No? Kung nakikita nyo po yung mga ibang partido, pagkatapos ng election, tameme na sila. Bakit po? Kasi kung basahin nyo mabuti ang kanilang mga pinanindigan, wala po silang talagang pinanindigan. Para pong kinuha lang nila sa isang libro ang ilang mga salita at gagawin nilang kanilang prinsipyo. Pero ako'y pupusta, lahat po ng mga membro ng iba-ibang partido, kung ano-ano man pa sila, kasi meron diyang Liberal Party, may Nationalista, may PDP Laban, at kung ano-ano pa. Wala pong makakapagsabi exactly kung ano ang kanilang pinanindigan, ano ang kanilang program of government, what is the philosophy behind the organization. What is their vision for the future? Ito ba ay nakalagay at nakasulat? Kami po sa Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino, nakalagay na po yan at nakasulat po yan. At kasalukuyang gumagawa tayo ng isang malawakang economic program. Isa pong economic program na that encompasses up to 50 years. Between now and 50 years from now. Bakit po importante yan? Dahil po ang Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino, ang nasa isip, hindi lang yung pang kasalukuyan, hindi lang yung para sa atin, kundi sa darating na henerasyon. Kinakailangan tuloy-tuloy ang pag-develop ng ating bansa pag na-implement ang programa na kinakailangan ma-implement. Ganyan po ang ating Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino. At salamat po sa inyo sa pagtatangkilik dito sa Katipunan Channel. Kasi po habang buhay ako at habang buhay din yata ang mga anak ko, itutuloy nila ito sa pagsisiwalat ng mga prinsipyong kinakailangan malaman po ng ating mga mamayan.
Okay, Cesar Soberano. Sir, Gil Ramos. Mr. Ramos, this is a question for you. What has gone wrong with the only superpower, the US, with 1 million virus infected and 67,000 dead?
Well, here, this is the country which, even if their anthem would say, we are the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Yeah.
So sometimes that land of the free phrase translates into pig-headed stubbornness. And so it's so difficult to keep them at home, and they keep on, like the city of New York, they always said, only in New York. So they keep on saying that they are almost like Superman, invulnerable to this disease. And so you saw a lot of incidents of the disease in New York. It's only then that they began to realize that they are just like ordinary morphers, like the rest of us.
Yeah.
So now, the process of social distancing and following it has been accepted, and because of that, with more people following it, you begin to see a slow flattening. But they were not so eager to do that at the very start because of the common belief that, this is America. We can do everything. We can handle it. And they overestimated the capabilities of America.
Mm-hmm. Right now, Gil, the U.S. Ranks #1 in number of cases and number of dead. Do you see this decreasing or increasing?
I've been watching the videos. I have been working. In fact, there is a group that is asking me to get involved in monitoring the COVID cases here.
Yeah.
And I see that there is an effort to reopen the economy as quickly as possible because they cannot just leave the dollar falling freely like that. So they will be reopening quite soon. Even the Vegas casinos are being opened right now. Because of this reopening process, the health apparatus of the country has been alerted to a resurgence of the virus infections. So what is happening is that they are reopening it. They are creating a process of coping for the resurgence. And based on their cost-benefit analysis, it would be a net benefit for the country, the U.S., if they do that. So that is in their own cost calculation. So you will expect a resurgence once the economy of the U.S. reopens. There will be a resurgence. They expect to have a second wave and even perhaps a third April wave of this. But at that point, they will already be in full gear, operating the economy at a normal phase.
Mm-hmm. Okay, whatever that normal phase is.
They are ready to accept more infections, relying on the fact that they have sort of created a protocol of encouraging or enhancing more recoveries out of infections.
Okay.
Okay, continue.
Continue.
RJ, kasi ka RJ Avellana, mabuhay po kayo.
Buhay ka, RJ.
Okay. Dami kasi, no? We will pick and choose. Devin Alicard, Cory Aquino is fake president of the Republic of the Philippines. Erwin Sung, mabuhay po kayo. Jose Lavin, thank you, economist Gil Ramos. B. Alice, mabuhay po, KDP. Kabutch, pangit po ang sound nyo sa dating sa Mariveles, Bataan. Parang nasa ilalim kayo ng tubig. Baka sa signal.
Baka nasa signal. Umaabot pala tayo sa Mariveles. Magandang gabi po sa inyo dyan sa Mariveles, Bulacan. No? Mariveles, Bataan. Ako po'y madalas napupunta doon sa lugar namin, sa Bagak, Bataan. No?
Okay. Good evening po, PM, mga taga-KDP. Sir Butch, naghahanap ang DOH FDA ng anti-COVID vaccine. Meron na pala Pilipino na discovery ang Fabunan brother. Fabunan vaccine, ayaw apurbahan. Sir Butch, sunod-sunuran ang DOH sa dikta ng WHO. Impluensyado masyado ni Bill Gates na may 4 big pharmaceutical lab na gusto mag-supply ng buong mundo. Mga KDP, kumilos na tayo, papunta na tayo sa one world dictatorial government at patatakbuhin ang mundo ng non-elite groups. Good evening. Grabe.
Ang ibig sabihin ng Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino ay hindi sasama dito sa one world government. We do not want and we do not advocate and we will not support the idea of one world government. If our government will not surrender our sovereignty into this idea of a one world government, then you can rest assured that I personally and hopefully the rest of the members of the KDP, will not allow ourselves to be part of this scheme for a few people to rule the world.
Okay, there's another question for Gil Ramos. Somebody is asking, so the 18, getting from your earlier comments about the Constitution and what Constitution will legalize a new government, if ever. So you're saying that the 1899 Malolos Constitution was never dissolved? That's a question.
Yes, it was not. Based on, I'm not a lawyer, but you can refer to the opinions of Alvin Tangol and also the opinions of Butch Valdes. They are both lawyers. And they said that based on constitutional law, a new constitution must have a repealing clause for the old constitution to be superseded by them.
Correct.
In the 1935 constitution, there was no repealing clause repealing the 1899 Philippine Constitution.
Yeah.
That is understandable because R.M. Recto himself, who participated in that American-sponsored convention, said that the Constitution is a living document. It is a reflection of the people's will at any point in time. And because in 1935, most of the people in the convention were also participants in the revolutionary struggle and in the Philippine-American War, they would not be in a frame of mind to approve a repealing clause to be included into the 1935 Constitution. Therefore, no repealing clause ever appeared in the 1935 document, which was finally approved by the President of the United States.
Right.
So you see, the 1899 Philippine Constitution is the only constitution drafted by a truly sovereign people that did not need any approval by a foreign paladin, which happens to be so in the 1935 Constitution, which happens to be so with the Malolos Constitution during the war, which happens to be so in the 1945 liberation process of the Americans when they reimposed the 1935 Constitution on us. And dramatically, as I have explained earlier, the 1987 Constitution is also a neo-colonial institution imposed on us by the Americans. And this was exposed to be so in the 1989 coup on Honasan, when it was the power of American might that sustained the presidency of Cory Aquino under the 1987 Constitution. And this incident has also been already done earlier when the Americans intervened again in the past in 1986 when they abducted President Marcos in Malacanang, and instead of bringing him to the Ilocos, which was his request, they brought him to Hawaii. This two incidents shows the neo-colonial character of the 1987 Constitution as a constitution that is not a product of the sovereign will of the Filipino people. Only the 1899 Philippine Constitution qualifies as such, a true sovereign constitution crafted by the Filipinos without any foreign interference.
Yes. I think that is quite clear. Are there any other messages? Can you read some more messages?
Marami pa.
Sige pa.
Okay, civilian authority is at all, from George Alvarez, civilian authority is at all times supreme over the military. Military and police is the protector of the people. The President Duterte have only slight power. The absolute power is from the people. That's the, George Alvarez again, the GCQ ay parang ginawang trial and error at mahina pagtupad ng precautionary measures. Ito'y pumalpak mag-second wave, sabay kumpara agad sa Singapore na hindi naman dapat hindi ma-extend. Reggie Maloy, Benito, good evening Sir Butch, Sir Gil. Jola Canula, good evening po, mabuhay po kayo. Franks, Sir J. Sir, hope pag-usapan niyo naman ang issue ng PhilHealth corruption. Kaya mga OFW migrants, dual citizenship, mandatory magbayad ng penalty pag-depensa salary. Sobra na to, wala naman kaming nagamit na PhilHealth, retirement, saving benefits, luging-lugi kami. Oredina, suggest a topic on, Alfredo Oredina, suggest a topic on universal healthcare. This can become Obamacare. Patients will be tied to experts and big pharma requiring prescription drugs. I think there is a bill already. I think that they have done this. So, there are many other questions.
Okay, there are a tremendous amount of, a lot of questions, a lot of greetings coming from our listeners. At maraming salamat po na samahan nyo kami ngayong gabi. I'll give you you have a couple of minutes to say your piece before we sign off.
Yes, I would like to end my presentation of a process, a possible path towards a transition to an effective way to reorganize Philippine society. By reciting the Cantation of Bonifacio of Rizal's stanza, Inis mi ultimo adios. Ang aking adhika sa pulo magkaisip, noong kasalukuyang bata pang maliit, ay ang tanghaling ka at minsang masilip sa dagat silangan, tilas na marikit. Matuyo ang luhang sa matay nanulutang, taas na ang nuot, walang kapulutan, walang bakas kunot ng kapighatian, gabahid ng dungis ni iyong kahihingan. Thank you very much.
Okay. At dyan po magwawakas ang ating pong programa ngayon sa ating Katipunan. Sa ngalan po ng ating mga katipon dito sa ating Katipunan at sa magagaling na staff ng DZXL Radio mo nationwide, because we are simultaneously broadcasting with DZXL Radio, AM radio. Kami po ay pansamantalang nagpapaalam at nagpapasalamat na sinamahan niyo kami ngayon, ang oro de peligro ng ating bayan at ng buong mundo dito po sa ating Katipunan. Hanggang sa linggo pong muli, mga katipon, 7 to 9 p.m. dito po sa Katipunan Channel. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.